You have been taught, perhaps unconsciously, to fear your own darkness. You walk through life as if the light were the only source of safety, as if the shadows within you were a foreign enemy to be exiled, silenced. Yet I tell you, the shadow is not your enemy. It is the gatekeeper, the threshold, the test that will determine whether you can step into the true magnitude of your power. And like any guardian at the threshold, it will not allow you to pass unchanged. It will first strip you, wound you, expose you to yourself, so that no illusion survives the crossing. This is why shadow work breaks you before it empowers you. You see, the psyche is not a flat plane of conscious thoughts and polite behaviors. It is a vast architecture built over ages, with chambers deep below the surface where your disowned parts reside. The shadow is born the moment you decide, consciously or unconsciously, that certain feelings, impulses, or truths must never be seen in the light of day. A child who learns that anger earns rejection hides that anger away. A dreamer whose visions are mocked locks those visions in the vault. Over time, the vault grows, crowded with unlived lives. These are not dead things. They do not vanish simply because you refuse them. They breathe in the dark. They dream of the day they can rise. And rise. They will either as creative fire or as destructive force, depending on whether you meet them willingly or are forced to face them in crisis. When I speak of shadow work, I do not mean mere introspection, nor a casual listing of flaws. I mean an alchemical descent into that underworld within you. I mean holding the mirror to your own most unacceptable truths and refusing to turn away. The myths speak of such journeys: Orpheus descending to the realm of the dead, Inanna stripped of her ornaments at the gates of the underworld, Christ entering the tomb. Each is a reflection of the same inner reality, that you cannot ascend without first descending. And you cannot claim the gold without first embracing the darkness that guards it. It is here that the modern spirit often falters. People wish for transformation without the breaking. They want the crown without the grave. They dabble in affirmations and positive thinking, imagining they can bypass the confrontation with what they have repressed. But you cannot trick the unconscious. It is not fooled by your rehearsed optimism. It knows the contents of the vault, and it will call you to them through dreams, through slips of the tongue, through the sudden and unexplained intensities in your relationships. The unconscious is a master dramatist. If you will not meet the shadow voluntarily, it will cast it in the shape of another person and send them onto the stage of your life to provoke you, to disturb you, to awaken the very feelings you had hoped to avoid. That is why your enemies often resemble you in ways you cannot bear to admit. That is why you are irrationally drawn to certain lovers whose flaws mirror your own hidden ones. That is why you judge others most harshly for the things you secretly fear within yourself. This is projection, the psyche's way of showing you your shadow on a screen you cannot ignore. You think you are fighting them, but you are fighting yourself. The breaking begins here. When you start to see the pattern, when you notice that the same kinds of conflicts or betrayals repeat in different forms, something within you starts to loosen. The ego, that careful architect of your conscious identity, feels the tremor, it begins to realize that it is not the sole ruler of this inner kingdom, and the ego does not like to be dethroned. This is the pain of shadow work, not the encounter with the shadow itself, but the dismantling of the self-image you have so carefully built. In my own work with patients, I have seen this countless times. The man who prides himself on being gentle discovers a core of rage so potent it terrifies him. The woman who identifies as selfless realizes she manipulates others through her sacrifices. The spiritual seeker who believes himself enlightened finds within his heart a deep well of envy and lust. At first, they resist. They try to explain away these revelations, to reinterpret them, so that they fit their old self-concept. But the shadow is patient. It does not vanish when ignored. It waits, and every time it waits, it grows. When finally they can no longer avoid the truth, the grief begins, not grief for the shadow, but for the death of who they thought they were. This is a real death, and it must be mourned. You cannot carry the old self into the new life you seek to inhabit. To cling is to stall. You must let it fall away. Like the snake shedding its skin, like the tree releasing its leaves in autumn. And yes, this leaves you bare, naked before the forces within you. It is at this stage that people often feel they are falling apart. They may dream of collapsing buildings, of drowning in dark water, of being chased through labyrinths. These are not random nightmares. They are the psyche's way of mapping the dissolution of the old structures. But here is the paradox. The more you allow yourself to break, the more space is made for the new. The unconscious does not seek to destroy you. It seeks to make you whole, and wholeness is not the same as perfection. Wholeness includes the parts you have hidden. It reclaims the outlawed emotions, the forgotten talents, the abandoned instincts. The shadow, once integrated, becomes an ally. Its raw power, once feared, becomes the very fuel of your transformation. I have often compared the shadow to a wild animal left in the dark, chained and starved. It will indeed be dangerous when it breaks loose. But if you approach it with respect, feed it with your attention, and give it a place in your inner landscape, it becomes a guardian, a source of vitality, a protector against the very forces you once projected onto others. Yet the path there is not linear. It moves in waves: confrontation, resistance, collapse, integration. You will think you have faced it all, only to find another layer beneath. The shadow is deep, for it contains not only the personal contents you have repressed, but the collective shadow of humanity itself, the inherited wounds, the archetypal fears, the ancient instincts. When you descend into your own darkness, you are also descending into the darkness of the world. This is why it feels so overwhelming. You are carrying not just your own denied truths, but the unspoken grief of your ancestors, the rage of the oppressed, the primal terror of a species that has always feared the night. And so you must have courage, not the courage to fight the shadow, but the courage to see it clearly, to sit with it as it reveals its stories, its motives, its origins, to listen without judgment, even when what you hear disgusts you or fills you with shame. For shame is the lock on the bolt, and compassion is the key. This is perhaps the hardest lesson, that you do not conquer the shadow by force. You integrate it through understanding, and understanding is born not of intellect alone, but of the heart's willingness to embrace what the mind has condemned. When you begin to do this, something shifts. The projections start to dissolve. You see people more as they are, not as distorted reflections of your inner world. You take back the power you had given away to your enemies and your idols. You feel a strange new strength rising in you, a strength that does not come from pretending to be pure, but from knowing you are complex, vast, and resilient enough to hold all that you are. But remember, the portal to power is guarded for a reason. Not everyone is ready to walk through. Some will approach it and turn back, preferring the comfort of the known self. Others will enter and be shattered, unable to reassemble themselves in a new form. The breaking is only the beginning. What follows is the long work of integration, the slow weaving together of the light and the dark into a fabric that can hold the full weight of your being. And this work, though it demands everything, gives back more than you can imagine. The breaking changes the texture of time. You may notice that days feel slower, as if you are moving through a dense atmosphere. Conversations become strange. Your reactions unpredictable even to yourself. You catch glimpses of old memories surfacing in places they do not belong. An image from childhood rising while you wash the dishes. A forgotten humiliation flooding you in the middle of a conversation. This is not regression. This is the unconscious moving its artifacts into the light, one by one, so that you can see them before they dissolve back into the stream of your being. In this stage, the dream world often becomes your most honest mirror. You may dream of rooms in your house you have never entered before, of locked doors now standing open, of underground tunnels leading to vast chambers filled with strange objects. These are not fantasies, they are the architecture of your psyche revealing itself. The rooms you never entered are the aspects of yourself you never explored. The locked doors are the boundaries you placed around certain emotions. The tunnels are the pathways into your deeper instincts. Long buried under layers of cultural conditioning, the psyche speaks in symbols, and dreams are its native language. If you ignore them, you miss the direct transmissions from the shadow itself. I recall one patient who dreamt repeatedly of a black horse tethered in her basement. The horse was strong, restless, its eyes shining with a wild intelligence. At first, she feared it. She avoided the basement in her waking life, and even in the dream, she would stand at the top of the stairs, watching it from a distance. But in time, the horse began to call to her. When she finally descended and placed her hand on its flank, she woke with tears on her face. In our work together, it became clear that the horse was her own untamed desire for freedom, a desire she had repressed in order to fulfill the expectations of her family and her culture. The basement was the shadow. The horse, its power. By facing it, she began to reclaim her life. This is the truth of shadow work. The very thing you fear contains the energy you need. The breaking is the process of releasing that energy from its prison, yet the release is not gentle. The ego has spent years, perhaps decades, constructing elaborate defenses to keep these forces contained. When they rise, they do so like a river breaking through a dam. This is why some people experience intense emotional storms, sudden anger, uncontrollable grief, surges of joy that border on madness. Do not mistake these for signs of failure. They are signs that the psyche is rebalancing itself, that the forces once split apart are moving toward reunion. But here's the danger. If you try to channel this newfound energy before integrating it, you risk turning it into another mask, another performance of self. Many seekers, having tasted the raw vitality of the shadow, rush to use it as proof of their transformation. They become intoxicated by their own darkness, wearing it as an identity, using it to dominate others or justify their wounds. This is not integration, it is possession. The shadow is not meant to be worshipped. It is meant to be woven into the whole. Without humility, the descent into shadow can turn into a deeper form of ego inflation than the light ever produced. The work, therefore, requires a rhythm, immersion and retreat, confrontation and rest. Just as the body cannot heal a wound all at once, the psyche cannot process the entire shadow in a single plunge. There will be cycles, times when the darkness rises and you engage it fully, and times when you step back, allowing the conscious mind to digest what it has encountered. These cycles may frustrate you. You may feel as if you are moving in circles, facing the same themes over and over. But in truth, you are moving in a spiral, returning to familiar places from a higher vantage each time. The shadow is multi-layered. What you integrate in one form will reappear in another. Deeper form, asking to be met again with the wisdom you have since gained. One of the most potent signs of progress is when you begin to feel gratitude toward the very figures, both in life and in dreams, who once triggered your deepest pain. At first, you will not want to hear this. You will insist that certain betrayals were unforgivable, that certain people were purely toxic. And indeed, I do not deny the harm they caused, but the alchemical truth is that they also played the role your psyche required to bring the shadow into view. The persecutor is often the midwife of your awakening. The enemy is the mirror that refuses to shatter, no matter how many stones you throw. To see this is to reclaim your projection, to take back the energy you bound to them and return it to yourself. I have seen this shift transform lives. A man who hated his domineering father realized, after years of work, that the father embodied the assertiveness he had repressed in himself. By integrating that quality, not the cruelty, but the strength, he became capable of standing in his own authority. A woman who spent decades in resentment toward a manipulative lover came to see that he was acting out the very dynamics she played in subtler forms with her friends and children. When she claimed her own capacity for manipulation, she no longer fell prey to it in others. The outer world changed because the inner world had been rebalanced, and here, perhaps, is the greatest mystery. Shadow work does not just heal the individual, it ripples outward into the collective, Each time you integrate a part of your own darkness, you remove one fragment of darkness from the shared human field. You no longer need to enact it unconsciously, no longer pass it to others through your projections or your wounds. This is why those who have walked through the breaking and emerged whole often radiate a strange calm. They are not without shadow, they have simply befriended it. And in befriending it, they become less dangerous to others and more dangerous to the forces that feed on human unconsciousness. But you must not rush this process. There is a seduction in the idea of power, especially when you have lived long feeling powerless. The shadow promises it quickly, the raw force of instinct, the ability to intimidate, to seduce, to manipulate. These are indeed powers, but they are the powers of the unintegrated shadow, and they carry the seeds of your own undoing, true power. The kind that does not collapse under scrutiny comes only when the shadow is neither master nor servant, but equal partner. This is a slow marriage, and it requires fidelity. You cannot return to the old habits of denial and expect the union to hold. The breaking then is a vow. When you cross that threshold, you are telling your psyche, I will not abandon you again. I will not exile parts of myself for the comfort of others. I will not pretend to be smaller than I am to avoid the fear of my own magnitude. And this vow will be tested. Life will send you situations to see whether you truly mean it. People from your past will reappear. Old patterns will whisper their familiar invitations. The shadow will show you not only the depths you have yet to explore, but also the heights you can only reach if you remain faithful to the work. And when you remain faithful, you will notice something extraordinary. The world itself begins to mirror your integration. Encounters that once triggered shame now evoke curiosity. Challenges that once overwhelmed you now awaken a steady resourcefulness. You find that your presence unsettles those still ruled by their unconscious, not because you attack them, but because you stand as living proof that the shadow can be embraced without being consumed. And in a world where most still flee from their own darkness, such proof is revolutionary. There is a moment, often subtle, when the breaking begins to give way to something quieter, though no less profound. It is not the triumphant rush that many imagine, not the sudden blaze of enlightenment, where all becomes clear. Rather, it is a stillness, a silence in the inner storm, a sense that the forces which once fought against you are now watching you with a different kind of regard, as if the shadow itself is considering whether you are ready to walk with it. This is the threshold of integration, and it arrives not through conquest, but through surrender. Surrender, in this sense, does not mean collapse or defeat. It is the cessation of the inner war. It is the moment you stop trying to be only what is admirable, acceptable, and safe, and instead allow the full range of your being to stand before you without censorship. You stop flinching at the sight of your own jealousy, your greed, your lust, your rage, and you stop romanticizing your compassion, your patience, your generosity. You see them all as energies, neither inherently good nor evil, but capable of both, depending on how they are held. This is the beginning of true freedom, when no part of you must be hidden to preserve your image. The myths knew this truth long before psychology gave it words. They speak of heroes who return from the underworld bearing strange gifts, Persephone with her pomegranate seeds, Odysseus with the wisdom of the dead, Christ with the keys to death and hell. These are the treasures of integration. The shadow, once faced, offers you not only its raw energy, but also its deep knowing of the worlds beneath the surface, for the shadow lives close to instinct. And instinct is a form of ancient intelligence. It knows what the conscious mind forgets, how to navigate danger, how to detect truth through the smallest shifts in tone and gesture, how to recognize the sacred in the most unlikely forms. But to claim these gifts, you must live differently. You cannot integrate the shadow and continue to arrange your life solely to avoid discomfort. Discomfort is the very teacher the shadow sends to keep you awake. If you avoid it, you drift back into the half-life of repression, where your vitality leaks away into the subterranean world you have turned your eyes from. The work demands that you place yourself where truth can reach you, even if it arrives wearing the face of loss, betrayal, or fear. At this stage, you may find that your outer relationships shift in ways you did not anticipate. Some will fall away naturally, as if the cord that bound you to them has been quietly severed. This is not always due to conflict. Sometimes it is simply that the old shared wound that kept you tethered is no longer active. Without it, the connection dissolves and you both move on. Others will deepen, becoming richer and more honest. As the unspoken becomes speakable and the masks drop, you will also attract new figures into your life, people who reflect the wholeness you are growing into rather than the fractures you once carried. But there is a more subtle shift as well. You will begin to see archetypes moving through your life like great, slow-turning constellations: the lover, the warrior, the trickster, the wise old man or woman, the orphan. To magician, they will no longer be abstract concepts, but living presences, sometimes embodied by people you meet, sometimes rising within you as new aspects of your own being. You will recognize that the shadow was never a single thing, but a gathering of these archetypes in their exiled forms. The lover in shadow becomes addiction or obsession. Integrated, it becomes a deep intimacy. The warrior in shadow becomes cruelty or domination. Integrated, it becomes protection and courage, and so on. The work is not to eradicate these forces, but to seat them in their rightful places at the table of the self, where they can serve rather than sabotage. In this integration, power begins to flow differently. It is no longer the brittle power of image management or control, but the steady current that moves through you and into the world. You will notice that you no longer exhaust yourself trying to be understood, nor do you spend as much energy defending your boundaries. They are felt rather than enforced, recognized even by those who might once have tested them. This is because the shadow's energy, once bound in fear, is now part of your field. People sense it. They may not know what has changed, but they will know that you are not someone to be trifled with, not because you threaten, but because you are whole. Yet this wholeness carries with it a responsibility. The more integrated you are, the more the collective shadow becomes visible to you. You will see the unconscious patterns that drive nations, communities, even spiritual movements. You will feel the weight of humanity's unresolved darkness, and you may be tempted to despair. This is where the deeper initiation begins, to hold what you see without collapsing under it, to bear witness without becoming cynical, to act where you can without being consumed by the illusion that you can save the whole world. The shadow work of the individual ripples outward, yes, but it is not yours to force the timing of another's awakening. In this way, integration matures into service, not the service born of self-sacrifice that depletes, but the service born of overflow. You give because the energy must move, not because you are trying to prove your worth. You speak truth not to punish, but to illuminate. You stand in the presence of another's shadow without recoiling, because you have faced your own and know it not as a curse, but as a crucible. This is when you understand the paradox in its fullness. The shadow was never the enemy. It was the part of you willing to do the work no other part wanted to do. It held the pain you could not process, carried the instincts you could not yet honor, guarded the treasures you were not yet mature enough to use wisely. It agreed to be the exile so that you could survive, and when you were ready, it came for you not to destroy you, but to break the shell that no longer fit. In this light, the breaking becomes not a punishment, but a form of initiation, the kind of initiation the soul has always known it must undergo before it can step into its full inheritance. By the time you reach this point, you no longer ask when the work will be finished. You see that it is a lifelong dialogue, a relationship that evolves as you evolve. There will be days when the shadow surprises you with something you thought you had already integrated, revealing a deeper layer beneath. There will be seasons when the darkness feels closer again, not because you have failed, but because you are being invited into a still greater wholeness. This is the rhythm of the psyche, and to walk it consciously is to live as both student and teacher, both wanderer and home. And so you find yourself standing in that strange place where power and humility meet. You know what you are capable of, and you no longer fear it. You know what the world is capable of, and you no longer deny it. You walk with the shadow at your side, not behind you or ahead of you, but beside you as an equal, and you realize, perhaps with a quiet smile, that this companionship, this strange and sacred alliance, is the true portal you were seeking all along. When the work has ripened in you, there is a subtle but unmistakable change in your relationship to life. You no longer treat existence as something that must be wrestled into your preferred shape. You stop living as though the goal were to escape certain emotions and cling desperately to others. Instead, you begin to live as a witness to a vast and mysterious unfolding one in which you are both participant and observer, creator and created. The shadow, once feared, is now recognized as an indispensable organ of this living body called the self. You no longer wish to amputate it. You wish to keep it healthy, to listen to its signals, to allow its instincts and insights to move through you without distortion. It is here that the real power emerges, not the loud, performative kind that shouts its arrival, but the deep, resonant presence that alters the space simply by being there. This is the power that does not depend on domination or approval, It is the kind of power that knows when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to let silence speak for itself. You will discover that much of what once consumed you no longer matters. The petty competitions, the games of image and status, the endless craving for validation, these things belong to a self you have already buried, a self that needed constant reassurance because it was living in exile from its own depths. But do not think that this means the journey is now effortless. The integration of the shadow is not a final victory. It is a covenant. There will be days when the old patterns stir again, when wounds you thought were healed begin to ache. There will be moments when life throws you into situations that awaken dormant fears or forgotten defenses. These are not setbacks, they are invitations to practice the living truth of your wholeness, to remember that the work is not to destroy the shadow, but to walk with it without letting it take the reins. You will fail at this sometimes. You will speak words you regret, make choices that are less than your highest vision, and when you do, the shadow will be there, not as a judge, but as a mirror reminding you to return, to adjust, to keep the dialogue alive. You will also notice that your relationship to other people's shadows changes profoundly. Where once you might have reacted with fear, disgust, or condemnation, you now see the deeper currents beneath their behavior. You recognize projection when it is aimed at you, and you no longer need to take it personally. You can stand in the fire of another's unprocessed pain without needing to defend or justify yourself. Sometimes this presence will disarm them. Other times it will enrage them. For not everyone is ready to see what they have hidden. But either way, you no longer feel compelled to play their game. Your allegiance is no longer to winning or losing, it is to truth. And truth, when lived, is luminous, not bright in the blinding way of an exposed spotlight, but luminous like the ember that glows steadily through the long night. People will feel this in you. Some will be drawn to it instinctively, sensing that you can hold what they cannot yet name. Others will shy away, for your presence stirs the sleeping shadow within them. This is not your concern. You are not here to awaken anyone before their time. You are here to live in such a way that your own shadow is neither denied nor unleashed upon the world unconsciously. This is why I say shadow work is not only the portal to power, it is the foundation of a life that can bear the weight of that power without collapsing. Without this work, the pursuit of influence, creativity, love, or spiritual vision becomes unstable, corrupted by the unacknowledged parts of the self that hunger for control, recognition, or escape. With this work, all those pursuits are infused with a deeper integrity. You create not to prove your worth, but because creation itself is the overflow of your wholeness. You lead not to dominate, but because leadership is the natural expression of one who sees the whole field. You love not to fill a void, but because love is the gravity of the integrated soul, and perhaps most mysteriously, if you begin to see the shadow not only as a personal phenomenon, but as a cosmic one. The interplay of light and dark runs through everything. The turning of the seasons, the waxing and waning of the moon, the cycles of creation and destruction that shape the universe itself. In this way, your shadow work becomes a form of aligning yourself with the deeper laws of existence. You see that there is no true life without death, no growth without decay, no awakening without the long night of the soul. This knowing frees you from the tyranny of perpetual positivity. You can embrace joy without denying sorrow, act with hope without fearing despair. So I will tell you this: do not fear the breaking. Do not turn away when the mirror cracks and shows you a face you do not wish to recognize. Stay, look, feel, let the old skin split and fall away. Let the grief wash through. Let the rage speak its truth without becoming your master. All of it is part of the passage. The shadow is not a curse. It is the keeper of the keys to the parts of you that can neither be destroyed nor stolen. And when you take those keys back, when you open the doors you once locked, you will find rooms filled with powers you never imagined you could claim. Walk through them with humility. Walk through them knowing that the journey does not end here. And when the next breaking comes, and it will, you will meet it, not as a victim, but as one who has passed through the fire before and knows that the flames, while fierce, are not there to consume you. They are there to forge you into something stronger, truer, and more whole than you have ever been. So go, not to banish your darkness, but to bring it home, not to rise above your shadow, but to walk beside it, not to become perfect, but to become complete. This is the work, this is the power, and this, whether you have yet realized it or not, has always been the path you were meant to walk.